As a young Latinx woman, I feel obligated to vote. I remember voting for the first time. It was actually pretty recently. I voted in the primary elections. And I remember feeling part of something big. I remember feeling like part of this new movement, this new generation that was fighting to bring change. And I was able to do this because of the women's suffrage movement. Women's suffrage is defined by Britannica as the right for women to vote in federal and local elections. Women suffragettes fought and risked their lives and spoke out so that I can have the right to vote today. Women's rights continues to be a topic discussed today. I have with me a sign that I took to a women's march a couple years ago. So as you can see, even though women's suffrage was a turning point, it was definitely not the end of women's rights. Women's suffrage started by the Seneca Falls Convention. The Seneca Falls Convention was the first convention to outwardly criticize women's place in society. The convention was organized by Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. They asked for social and legal changes, and they wanted women to be elevated in society. After the Seneca Falls Convention, the women's suffrage movement began to pick up momentum, and many women began protesting. The women's suffrage movement was scary for a lot of people because they thought that if women had the right to vote, that they wouldn't spend time with their family, that they wouldn't do the typical things that the woman or wife does in the home. And so with me, I have a graphic showing the husband taking care of the kids while the suffragette goes off and is not there with the family. So this movement gained a lot of negative attention. So as women were protesting, local authority figures, which were men at the time, thought that these women needed to be arrested. And so a lot of them were put in prison. And from jail, these women created a hunger strike to show that they would not give up. This went on for a while until finally, in 1920, women received the right to vote. And this actually only included white women. And I say white women because women of color did not get the right to vote until 1975, when the last marginalized group, Latinx women, were finally given the right to vote. Some key figures in the women's suffrage movement were Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. Susan B. Anthony was such a key figure in the movement that they decided to put her on the dollar coin. So the dollar coin is actually pretty common. You might find it if you use one of the vending machines at school and they give you a dollar coin back. You might notice that it has Susan B. Anthony on it. The reason that it didn't take up as much momentum is because it is silver and people were confusing it with the quarter. So Susan B. Anthony devoted her life to women's rights, as did Elizabeth Cady Stanton. They were both key figures and they both contributed so much to the women's suffrage movement. Unfortunately, they both died before women had the right to vote in 1920. So women's suffrage has many effects on today's society. It paved the road for this new conversation of women's rights. And we continue to pursue women's rights because women are still underrepresented in government and there is still lack of equality. The women's suffrage movement is the reason that people like me are able to vote today. And the women's rights movement has so much more to go. But it was all started by the women's suffrage movement. Thank you.